What we need is widespread public recognition that the central government should be limited to its basic functions: defending the nation against foreign enemies, preserving order at home, mediating our dispute. We must come to recognize that voluntary cooperation through the market and in other ways is a far better way to solve our problems than turning them over to the government.
This is where much of the future strength of the United States lies, in places like Ottumwa, Iowa, where ordinary, hard-working American people live. People of all economic levels live in Ottumwa, but there are no extremes of either wealth or poverty. All are part of a community, each part of which depends on the others for a stable and happy life worth living. This is a kind of community that formed the character of democratic America. We began this series by stressing two ideas: the idea of human freedom as embodied in Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence, the idea of economic freedom as embodied in Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. Those two ideas, working together, came to their greatest fruition here in the heartland of America. But the basic character of the society that they created has been changing as a result of the rise of another set of ideas. We have forgotten the basic truth that the founders of this country knew so well, that the greatest threat to human freedom is a concentration of power, whether in the hands of government or anyone else. Throughout the Western world, more and more of us are coming to recognize the dangers of an over-governed society. But it will take more than a recognition of danger. Freedom is not the natural state of mankind. It is a rare and wonderful achievement. It will take an understanding of what freedom is, of where the dangers to freedom come from. It will take the courage to act on that understanding if we are not only to preserve the freedoms that we have, but to realize the full potential of a truly free society.
Milton, all through your discussions, you hammer away at two things: the theories of Adam Smith on the free market and of Thomas Jefferson on central power. One thing that troubled me a little bit about your discussions was that it seemed to me that you were a little bit the way psychoanalysts used to talk about Freud, that you believed they had given us the word, and that even though 200 years had gone by, it was still the word, that circumstances had not changed the meaning in any way. Are you that fixed about their ideas?
There's a great difference between principles and the application of principles. The application of a principle has to take account of circumstances. But the principles that explain how it is that an automobile operates are no different from the principles that explain how a horse and buggy operated or how a bow and arrow operated. The principles that Adam Smith enunciated, the philosophy that Thomas Jefferson enunciated, are every bit as valid today as they were then. But the circumstances are different, and therefore the application is in many cases very different. In addition, there's been a great deal of work and study and scholarly activity that has gone on since then. We know a great deal more about the way in which an economy works than Adam Smith knew. He was wrong in many individual details of his theory, but his overall vision, his conception of how it was that without any central body planning it, millions of people could coordinate their activities in a way that was mutually beneficial to all of them. That central concept is every bit as valid today as it was then, and indeed, we have more reason to be confident in it now than he had, because we've had 200 years more experience to observe how it works.
All right, well, then let's go back to Jefferson.
Fine.
You say cut the functions of central government to the basic functions advocated by Jefferson, which was what? Defense against foreign enemies, preserve order at home, and mediate our disputes. Now, Can we do that in the complicated, the complex world we live in today without getting into very serious trouble?
Suppose we look at the activities of government in the complex world of today and ask, to what extent has the growth of government arisen because of those complexities? And the answer is very little indeed. What is the area of government that has grown most rapidly? The taking of money from some people and the giving of it to others. The transfer area. HEW, a budget 1.5 times as large as a whole defense budget. That's the area where government has grown. Now, in that area, the way in which technology has entered has not been by making certain functions of government necessary, but by making it possible for government to do things they couldn't have done before. Without the modern computers, without modern methods of communication and transportation, it would be utterly impossible to administer the kind of a big government we have now. So I would say that the relation between technology and government has been that technology has made possible big government in many areas, but has not required it.
I know, I believe, I say I know, I think I know, but I'll say I believe that you blamed the government for the Great Depression of 1929 to 1933. And of course, you had to blame FDR for all he did. But most people feel that he saved this free economy of ours.
Given the catastrophe of the Great Depression, there's no doubt in my mind that emergency government measures were necessary. The government had made a mess. Not FDR's government, it was government that preceded him, although it was mainly the Federal Reserve System which really wasn't subject to election. But once FDR came in, he did two very different kinds of things.
Well, had the government made a mess by what it did, or but by what it didn't do?
By what it did, by its monetary policies, which forced and produced a sharp decline in the total quantity of money. It was a mismanagement of the monetary apparatus. If there had been no Federal Reserve System, in my opinion, there would not have been a Great Depression at that time. But given that the Depression had occurred, and it was a catastrophe of an almost unimaginable kind, I do not fault at all. Indeed, on the contrary, I commend Roosevelt for some of the emergency measures he took. They obviously weren't of the best, but they were emergency measures, and you had an emergency and you had to deal with them. And the emergency measures such as relief programs, even the WPA, which was a make-work program, these served a very important function. He also served a very important function by giving people confidence in themselves. His great speech about the only thing we have to fear is fear itself was certainly a very important element in restoring confidence to the public at large. But he went much beyond that. He also started to change, under public pressure, the kind of government system we had. If you go beyond the emergency measures to the what he regarded as the reform measures, things like NRA and AAA, which were declared unconstitutional, but then from there on to the Social Security system, to the...
All right, well, take the Social Security system for a minute. The people wanted that. They wanted that protection. They were frightened. They wanted welfare.
Not at all.
Well, you said pressure. Pressure from whom?
Pressure from people who were expressing what they thought the public ought to have. There was no widespread public demand for Social Security programs. The demand for
no demand for welfare with 13 million people
there was a
unemployed?
demand for welfare and assistance. I was separating out the emergency measures from the permanent measures. Social Security in the first 10 years of its existence helped almost no one. It only took in money. Very few people qualified for benefits. It wasn't an emergency measure. It was a long-term measure. And it had to be sold to the American people, primarily by the group of reformers, intellectuals, New Dealers, the people associated with FDR. The Social Security is one of the most misleading programs. It has been sold as an insurance program. It's not an insurance program. It's a program which combines a bad tax, a flat tax on wages up to a maximum, with a very inequitable and uneven system of giving benefits, under which some people get much, some people get little. So that Social Security...
Well, would you now abolish Social Security?